Thanks everybody for coming. Want to introduce two speakers today, Philip Rosedale and Cory Ondrejka from Linden Lab. And I guess got 5-6 years ago now when I first met these guys, somebody had told me they were working on something pretty cool, and I went and they were originally located in Hayes Valley up in San Francisco, and literally in a garage. It was a garage that was almost still being used because there was an auto body shop next door, and the fumes would come in. And to the other side was a corset shop that served dark garden. They had fetish wear and other types of things. And so this was around like 2000, 2001. So there wasn't a whole lot of technology, especially consumer technology innovation going on at the time. But both Philip and Cory had a really audacious vision of a world that users would build. And again, if you remember, this is sort of before blogging and podcasting and everything caught on. So if you were talking user-created content, people would think sort of like bad MP3 files from mp3.com, be like, why would anybody ever want to do that? And nobody can create anything of interest. And so then when I started to look at what they were doing, of course, immediately signed up and had the honor and privilege of working with them for a number of years before I came over to Google. And so I think late 2004, Philip and Cory came and sort of gave us a little bit of a peek inside of Second Life, which is a fully user-created virtual world, built, programmed, sculpted, designed, and lived in by now over 150,000 people in 91 countries. Between the size, acreage, and gross domestic product, I think it's larger than Monaco, and Luxembourg is next. So we figure it's only another 5 years till they get a TLD for URLs and then eventually a UN seat. So thank you, Philip and Cory, for coming and filling us in on the development of this world over the last few years.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you, Hunter. So we'll in I hope Google and Linden Lab style, we'll make this fun. We're certainly not going to show you any slides. We're just going to goof around in Second Life. Cory is the great architectural brain behind Second Life's technology, behind its scripting language, behind the team, everything else. And on top of that, he's like the fastest builder in Second Life. So we'll do this fun thing of I can try to keep your attention and talk about like the company and how successful we are, and then Cory can attempt to distract you by making dominoes. Yeah, Cory was going to say we're unfortunately today, although we love Google, we don't love Google enough to delay a system upgrade. So we're actually like not really in the main grid right now, as we call it in Second Life. We're doing a database upgrade right now. So we didn't want to change this because we'd already scheduled it and wanted to come down and chat. And so Cory's alone. So the only difference about the real Second Life is that there's always a ton of people hanging around gawking at what you're doing, which is kind of part of the magic of it. But anyways, how many people here like have used Second Life or have an account or sort of know? So a few. So like Hunter said, the basic idea with Second Life was, and it wasn't something that was possible until 5 or 6 years ago to even really start working on, it was this radical idea that, well, what if you could create a 3D immersive environment that looked as good as a video game, that was tactile and visceral and exciting and sexy, fun to be in, but had the, of course, very web-like and very compelling property that everything in it was built by you. And in fact, that the method of building would be the method of living, that you would just, do things there in the same way that you do them in the real world. You could touch things, you could sculpt things, you could paint things, you could just build, you could make stuff. And so we started the company with this vision, like what would it take technologically to build an environment in which you could make things and make really cool things. And so, the basic capabilities discussion of Second Life is, as you can see, we've got a physics engine that's simulating the whole world. Everybody sees the same thing. That physics is happening like on the servers, not on the clients. There's a scripting language. There's a little script that's inside every one of those dominoes, because I bet they're going to set themselves back up in a minute. And the dominoes are basically programmed to set themselves back up after a second. See that? And the scripting language, which Cory actually wrote the syntax for, is a big part of the system. So he can actually code the behaviors in each of those objects. They live in each of those objects. The world of Second Life itself, as you can imagine, is a huge server farm, because it takes a lot of machines to simulate all the stuff that people make. So just, as a basic, for those who haven't kind of heard of Second Life, Cory is standing in one server machine right now. The whole world of Second Life is at present about 2,000 CPU cores, running about 30,000 acres of real estate with about 10 million user-created objects, of which that domino would be an example of one. The world is inconceivably large. That is to say, the rate at which we're adding new servers, the rate at which people are buying new land in it, exceeds vastly the rate at which you as an individual could like walk around and see all the stuff that's happening. So its event horizon, if you will, is kind of expanding outward at this point. We kind of passed that point a few months ago. As Hunter said, there's about 150,000 people living in here. There's about 5,500 people online in the evening, max concurrency. People are doing things like taking pictures. Cory can show you like all those little red dots are actually, there's a photo blogging service that a third party set up that's called SL Pics. And we're just, very Google style, we're just taking the feed from those guys and putting those pictures up. But these are actually live pictures that are coming out of Second Life as people are just taking snapshots of what's going on. So again, just to give you an idea of scale, 2,000 machines, a gigabit per second at peak, so very, very large server deployment. 5,000 people in there, about 20,000 people a day using Second Life. And then the most amazing thing is if you give people the ability to make things, obviously they're going to value those things and in some cases want to buy and sell them from each other. One of the important things we did right from the beginning was we allowed everybody to own their own intellectual property. So when you build a rocket like that, it really belongs to you. You can mark it as being created by you. You can sell it to somebody for a certain price. That's cool. I haven't seen that. Is it going to blow up? This short attention span theater, when you're in Second Life, everything needs to explode or have a firework, or your mania for entertainment is even so greater than real life, because it can be. So all these things that Cory's doing are all examples of this stuff. But the most amazing thing is, if you bought one of those fireworks, and we could go on one of the catalog sites and look right now for one, if you bought a firework like that, it might cost you 250 Linden dollars, which would be about $1 US, okay, to buy that firework. So you might ask yourself, are these guys just crazy? Or does this stuff really work? So the answer to the really works question, and that's kind of the update from late 2004 when we were here, is it works in a big way. Users buy and sell objects like that firework from each other at a rate of, at this point, about $5 million US a month. And that's climbing like 25% a month. There's about 4 million transactions. The average transaction size is like around $1. There's in the last 30 days, you talk about, is this Costco? Is this 10 lucky people selling people all the things they buy in here? In the last 30 days, there were 180,000 distinct objects that were bought by those people. So what you have here is you have a vast creative environment in which you can make anything, combined with a property and rights and transactional currency system that lets people buy and sell things from each other very, very easily. The other piece of this, if you're wondering, so can you build a real living on that then? If there's $5 million a month in transactions, bear in mind, this is not money that we're making. This is $5 million in transactions between individuals in Second Life. The way that works is, oh, that's weird. Are you drawing with that? Oh, it's Star Axis stuff, right? Yeah. So one of the most prolific creators of objects in Second Life is the guy who made the wand that Cory can probably show us. It's like in his hand. And this magic wand basically does things. It's this wand of many strange things. So as Cory does stuff, it just sort of follows along and does strange things. Like if he says like, listen or something, it'll make a giant ear, and it's just incredibly weird. Watch this, Santa. It really brings home the whole $5 million in Santas every month. The way people make money, so let me wax on a couple of the aspects of this. So people are basically, as I said, they're buying and selling things to the tune of about $5 million a month. This enables a substantial number, thousands of people to make, at this point, significant amounts of money with sort of low hundreds of people that would tell you this is their full-time job. This is all they do in Second Life. Now, those people come from all over the world. So one of the things that's so profound about Second Life is you can kind of imagine, like, Cory, do you have the Sabro, though? Look at that. He's just like, he knows me. He melded with me. So check this gun out, right? So this is like the coolest gun you can get in Second Life. It was built by a graduate student up in Seattle, and that student has gone to college basically on the revenues that he's made from selling this weapon. We're trying to hire him right now. Don't you? The gun that he made there costs about $5. It's about 1,000 Linden dollars or 1,200 Linden dollars, so it's about $5 a piece. Now, just stop for a moment and consider something. All it takes to make money in Second Life is basically like a PayPal account. I can describe it more. I'll stop for questions and we'll start talking about stuff. There's a currency exchange system where you basically take the Linden dollars that you've charged for the gun you've sold, and you basically can give those Linden dollars. You can sell those Linden dollars to somebody else on the currency exchange, and with a PayPal account or a wire transfer, you can get the money back from what you're doing. What this means is that some kid in some faraway country where the cost of living is a tenth or what it is here, can basically sheerly on the basis of his or her intellectual horsepower can build a gun that competes with the gun that Cory had on. All that's necessary is cleverness. All that's necessary is intellectual skill, diligence, working with people in the world, as necessary to get the thing marketed or whatever. But none of this requires shipping, tariffs, H-1B visas, or anything else. And so your international kid out there can basically sell a $5 a pop gun to what is nominally, at this point at least, a domestic U.S. or North American audience that's willing to pay $5. So if you think about that, it makes you think, wow, how fast can something like this grow? So we've created a sort of a pure intellectual palette or canvas for people to do things, and we've actually created a way for the ones who want to monetize that. So that's kind of a basic overview. You can see Cory's. As you can also imagine, some of the big businesses in Second Life are clothing. You can see how dressed up Cory is there. The market for tattoos and skins and sunglasses and clothes and rings and earrings is huge. Those are each one I said there is like multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in object sales. And a lot of this is stuff nobody really knows yet. That's why it's fun to come talk to you guys. This is changing very rapidly. People are building content very rapidly. A couple of years ago, this was all basically just dirt. We started in 2003 with 16 simulators online. And there's 2,000 simulators online today. The other thing, let's see about the mechanism, what haven't I told you, is you basically buy real estate from us. You give us money to basically rack a new server, if you will, and that server just comes up wherever you want it on the map, and you're able to then develop the land. So for example, the woman who's making the most money in Second Life is a woman who lives in Germany who's our little sort of Rockefeller. And she's making probably $175,000 or so a year, basically developing real estate for people, building houses and then reselling those houses to them, that real estate at a higher price. So she has an immense business doing that. So just like in the real world, real estate pays to be in real estate, even in Second Life. Touch a little bit on demographic. It's really the early adopter crowd. A lot of people see Second Life and they think, okay, it's a bunch of IT nerds that are doing that. And yeah, indeed, we were. The people who built it. But if you look at the demographic today, it's 43% female. The average age is 32. The age distribution looks just like the U.S. population curve. There's a smooth descent to 60, 70 years old. There's lots of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s using Second Life. I mentioned international. It's about 25% international. So we believe that the people that are using it and coming in and doing things in here are pretty much just everybody. Anybody that has a clever idea, entrepreneurial, enjoys the community that's evolving around all this. So that's probably a good overview. And I'll look to you guys and all this stuff is sort of baffling. So in terms of having a good conversation and going farther on this stuff, what do you want to know about? And I'll kind of keep going.
Parameters for creating objects in Second Life. I know the clothing, the textures, and so forth. The gun requires actions and scripting. What is the package that is an object that you sell?
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Can you repeat your question?
So the question is, what are the parameters? Kind of how do objects work? How do actions on objects work? Clothing's easy to understand, but how about something like a gun? How does that actually work? Cory can kind of show us here by taking a look at this gun in more detail. The gun itself is made of basic primitives that are glued together to form a larger object. And then there are scripts, which can be essentially dragged into each of those parts of the gun. The scripting language itself is basically event-driven, and it's a sort of a C-style language. that lets you respond to events. So something like on res means when the thing gets made, do this. And then there'll be something like link message means some other object talk to it. There's messages for like on clicked, like when you click on something and then when you let up on it. So it's, I don't know, Cory, I don't know what language you'd be the most like, but
It's a very C-like syntax.
yeah, it's pretty easy to modify things. Obviously, to do great work in it requires that you be a great programmer, just like anybody else. But to go in and like modify what noise, your little squeaky toy makes when you squeeze it in Second Life, that's really actually pretty easy. And rapid modification, people riffing on each other's ideas, is definitely a big part of the power of Second Life. We were just telling you. So that's basically the kind of a rough overview. Yes.
Why didn't you use a standard scripting language like Luau?
Yeah, a standard scripting language like Luau. I don't know, Cory, you want to?
The reason we didn't was because we knew we wanted to have thousands of people writing physical simulations and scripts working together. And when we looked at the state of the art in 2000 on sandbox languages, the amount of work to beat one of the existing sandbox languages into submission was very comparable to the amount of building one from scratch.
There was also issues like garbage collection. And then do you want to talk about, we're working on the next generation of this?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now actually is we're switching over to Mono. So Mono, if you know what that is, it's the open source .NET implementation. So we basically are, where we are right now on that is the current scripting language is compiling to the common language runtime, and we're basically in final testing on that, and that gives us a pretty significant speed up and ultimately lets people start writing in other CLI languages. So our goal is to move now to a more standards-based approach.
I should also say, just for those who don't know, our whole system and everything has been built on a lot of open source components. The servers are all Linux based. The code running on them is just C++. We have clients for Linux, Mac, and Windows. We use a bunch of standards based stuff wherever we can. The complexity, though, of what we've done is extraordinarily high. There's a tremendous amount of code, interfaces, modules, conceptualizations in here, and some of this stuff, there just wasn't anything out there yet for us to really reuse. Who's next? What's next? What else can we talk about?
Collisions. How do collisions work?
Collisions between physical objects?
I mean, sort of end out there with the collisions ultimately get propagated as your clients.
Right. So one of the coolest things about this, and one of the key architectural pieces that we work together on, by the way, my background, Cory and I both are the two senior technical guys at the company. I was the CTO, and before that, the VP of Media Systems at Real Networks. My background's physics, so I worked on programming, networking, codecs, stuff like that. Cory has a very wide background, but most recently, before Linden Lab, was working on gaming technology, so networking, 3D, stuff like that. One of the neat things that we did, to answer your question, is we built a simulation environment in which the servers contain all the simulation, so they're authoritative. And then they, in a terse manner, update all the clients with the same information. So what's so cool about the Domino's example is there's basically a rigid body physics engine. We use Havoc as one of the components of that for rigid body collisions that's handling the collisions of those dominoes. And then what's so cool about that is that if there's multiple people sitting in world, and again, I apologize, we can't be sitting in the main grid right now, which sucks. When there are multiple people sitting in there, they all see those dominoes contact and fall at exactly the same time, because basically the server is authoritatively sending that information. The clients are essentially kind of locally predicting it a little bit so that it looks smooth. Again, I mean, we're really good as a development team. There's just kind of a ghastly amount of work that's gone into this. It's, as Hunter said, it's a 5-year project now. So.
What about the predictive aspect on the clients and how that provides? There's a lot of play there.
Yeah.
Do things rewind on the client? Do they see things? Do they get that deja vu?
Oh, well, sometimes you can have an inconsistency between the prediction state of the client and what's happening on the server. And when the server gets the new data, sends you the new data, it updates. So rubber banding or that kind of snapping back happens sometimes, yeah. But we've done a pretty good job of eliminating that. The other thing that's really cool is that our simulation is, and this is the thing we can't show you, Cory's just standing on one simulator. But when there are multiple ones connected together, you can't see the boundaries. So we've done all the edge crossing behavior and continuing the physics simulation from one machine onto another machine. We've done all that work, and that's a tremendous amount of work. It's a big peer peer connected network, essentially, the 2,000 CPUs that I mentioned. And each of them is running a physics simulation and a scripting simulation and a weather simulation.
So I didn't realize that there's no server boundaries, actually. The servers are all one world. You can cross.
All one world, yeah. There's no shards in Second Life. So if you think about Second Life, people always talk about World of Warcraft. You know, everybody knows World of Warcraft with 5 million people in there. Not only is it, does not have the sort of capability that we've built here, but we're probably, I don't know, about as big as a single World of Warcraft shard right now. So from the standpoint of people being in world at the same time, we're like the biggest in the world, or we're very close. Well, actually, EVE Online, for those who geek out on games, they've actually done a really nice job with a single world. They have like 20,000 people or something in world at once. But the point is that the big online environments, they're amplified by content, by complex behavior, by people being able to form communities. You have to have all that stuff happening in a contiguous space. And so right from the beginning, the whole idea was that the network was all these machines, and it was all going to be connected together, and everything was going to be visible from everybody else. And that's what's driven a lot of the economic competition that drives that big, $5 million a month I talked about. All that stuff is driven by the fact that it's all in one world. You can walk somewhere and bust out something cool that you've built and show it to somebody else. You don't have to worry about boundaries of any kind. Yes?
So what kind of security issues have you run into from having all this user-created executable content?
Lots. So the question is, what kind of security issues have we run into? And the answer is, we could talk about that for like an hour.
The really important thing is the architecture is set up so that there's very little action at a distance. So while you may be able to say, confuse havoc and cause the physics engine to take down an individual machine. They're 2,000 simulators. It's 125 square kilometers of space. So if there's one machine that crashes and then comes back up, it isn't a tremendous impact. The most interesting attacks have been self-replicating attacks. The scripting language allows self-replication, so we have the expected gray goo attacks. And basically there we respond by giving residents a lot of local control. We now call the space lasers that allow us to, go to orbit and nuke the site from orbit because it's the only way to be sure, And so we have ways of responding to that. And the sort of traditional game response would be to nerf those features. Nerfing meaning that when the game creator decides, hey, that's a really cool feature, we'll take it away. And we've decided we're not going to do that because there are too many cool things you can do with self-replication, and it's a useful feature to have. So while there certainly are security issues, the scripting language is very heavily sandboxed. Everything's happening on the server side, so it's a lot harder to cheat us than games that trust the client at all. We have an amazingly dumb client, right? Because we're streaming everything, even though all the content isn't on the client most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the simple thing, the other thing about security is sort of rights management and control. Because everything's happening on the server, you don't have this ability to go cleverly hack your World of Warcraft client and steal money from the other guy. You can't do that because everything's happening at a central server. So we're as immune to those attacks as you guys are, in the sense that you're maintaining central databases. If you screw that up, people can hack in. But if you do a good job, it's possible to fully protect it. So like the scripting language, when Cory's opening those scripts, that script, the actual source code of the script, is only on the server, and it'll only send it to you to look at it if you have the correct rights for it. So on things like that, we can reasonably preserve rights so people can sell stuff, and there's not just rampant copying. Having said that, there's a rich debate, and in fact, a real pragmatic usage case in Second Life, that makes it better than the real world, in that people do tend to share things. It's a very open, sharing-based environment, and you can choose to have all the objects you've got set, fully permissive. So you give them to people. We believe that this is better than the real world in a lot of ways. And a lot of the people that are here live here, and they live here because they make friends here, and they can build things, and they can externalize their thoughts here in ways that in the real world you just can't. So we don't see this as a game. We see it as a platform that is in many ways better than the real world. And everything so far indicates that it's kind of growing that way.
What limitations on quality of graphics? It's not really impressive.
Right. So the quality of the graphics. Why don't the graphics look better?
Part of it is because we're not in a library.
Yeah. So part of it is content quality. We're not in the main grid hanging around in some of the most carefully built spaces that are generating lots of that commerce I'm talking about. Those spaces are quite amazing. People are able to do local lighting, shadows, and things like that on their own, essentially, as light maps and shadow maps and things like that. But probably the biggest thing you're talking about is, where are the lights and where are the shadows? When you look at the graphics engine, the triangle count per scene here is typically a good fraction of a million. So it's a very high density scene. The challenge, I mean, we could speak to this again for hours, but probably the biggest thing in our system is that we're not able, well, we're working on this, but the challenge with Second Life is because everything is editable, you can't pre-light. So you can't pre-light and pre-compute a scene. So you can't set up some of the easy tricks that you can use to make a scene in the Unreal Engine look better. Having said that, technology is on our side. This stuff will look exactly like the Unreal Engine. It'll catch everybody else because GPU technology is moving toward everything being dynamic and all CG effects and others running in real time without regard for the content set. We're not there today, so with us, you see us having to strike a trade-off between a lot of editable objects and a lot less lighting, basically. I'm being real simple. We could, come and see us afterwards. We can go on and on about all the little other things that are good or bad.
What's your minimum graphics config, and like what's your user base's actual config in comparison to that?
Yeah, most of our users probably have a little bit good deal better than our min spec. Our minimum spec today is like a gigahertz machine and a GeForce 2. Second Life runs really slow under that configuration. It will run on a Mac. Cory's running it on a Mac here. This is not a particularly great machine. It'll run on a G4 PowerBook, but horribly. On an IntelliTosh, is that only our word, or do other people say IntelliTosh? Apple probably doesn't think that's funny. On one of those machines, it actually runs great. Just for everybody to know, Apple's going to have a nice renaissance here of reasonably fast machines now. The Intel chips are competitive now with PCs in terms of graphics. Base configuration that our users have is probably more like a GeForce FX or something like that. And any modern PC though that's bought in the last year and a half is going to run Second Life at full speed. Yes.
So all your content's on the server and it's being dynamically created. You can't check it. What kind of a bandwidth problem do you have pushing this out to clients?
5 years ago we would have been out of business. Bandwidth is so cheap today, as you guys well know, that it's a negligible cost to us. But we run at an average of about 80 or 90 kilobits per second to each client that's online. So again, that's about a gigabit per second of peak egress right now at heavy traffic times. But a gigabit per second today is virtually free. So it's 84. So 84 kilobits per second on average. And then it'll peak up to several hundred. But yeah, it's a lot of bandwidth. That's definitely one of the sea changes that we're taking advantage of, is the ability to just cavalierly use quite a bit of bandwidth.
I came in late, so forgive me if this has already been covered. But I'm wondering if the way this thing works is you've downloaded the models to the client, and what you're streaming is positioning information.
No. So the big challenge, the big trick for us was that we didn't do that. We're actually streaming the model information. We're essentially streaming the vertex information. The way that we're doing that, though, is very, very clever. We're streaming the vertices and the textures and the sounds and everything else in real time. That was our big kind of mission of the company, was to take an environment and make it so that the download, our download is 20 meg. And there's 10 million user-created objects in the world and about 15 terabytes of user-created data that are in Second Life. So our whole challenge was to send none of that information down beforehand. And we also believed that, if you look back on something like, The Sims or something like that, really interesting people are only going to get interested in an environment in which there's that unpredictability that comes from there not being a fixed monopoly set, so to speak, or, piece set, Lego set of things.
Keeping the client dumb, you made a calculation that if the world got rich enough, it would become impractical to download the models and just animate them. So you decided that by sending the birds to the screen, that would remain fairly constant as the models got.
Well, we struck it in between where, it's technically to stream the vertices for one of these typical scenes would be unfeasible. So what we did was we came up with some very clever ways to essentially use these sculptable building blocks, which you haven't seen yet, where you can twist and manipulate and stretch an object. So we're using a kind of a constructive solid geometry model. We're streaming the textures, we cache them optimistically. But again, there's 15 terabytes of data. If we ship this thing to you in a box, it would be on 2,000 DVDs.
How big is the cache on a client?
Up to a gig, 250 meg to a gig. You can set it yourself. I think it tries to use as much as it can.
Can you improve things by having a hierarchical model? Like for instance, those dominoes are all kind of replicas of one another, and then the dots and the dominoes are replicas, and that way you wouldn't have to transmit all the vertices of all the objects.
That's stuff that we're, some small pieces of that we've done and more stuff we're doing. So we're building hierarchical models in to optimize stuff. Cory's smiling because one of my big design decisions at the beginning was, let's not try and do that. It's just crazy. We can't do hierarchies. But
one of the very few blunders we made, actually, not having hierarchy.
Yeah, it seems like that.
Yeah, one of the only things, the coolest thing that you can't quite do yet in Second Life is you can't have like a big jointed monster, walking around. You can if you want to really work at it, but it's terribly hard. So we need to add that kind of hierarchy. But that stuff's, we understand how to do that. We have we have a pretty good sized team.
So do people find everything just by browsing?
No. It's great. Here we go. The finder's probably not up. You have to type something. But go to classifieds or whatever. Yeah.
So classifieds aren't going to be up on this.
Okay, so this is an example of this. Basically, what we let people do is list content, places, people, objects going forward in common listings that you can get to. We do things like sorting by traffic. That's pretty cool. That's how many people have come to that location. We also allow people to pay for classified ads, and we actually let them bid for placement. So they bid for how high they're going to be in the classified ad listings. That itself is a big and growing business. So it's pretty. I think that search and discovery of content is one of the key assets that we're building here on top of this data. Obviously, there's 10 million objects in here. It's already a big search problem.
You said that everyone owns their own infrastructure by their objects. So when you allow someone else to modify something you created, what's the IP model for that? Let's say you're selling something and someone else wants to modify it and sell it. You're paying to the original owner every time.
What we've built into the system is the ability for you to set objects on a quite granular level as to whether you want them to be editable, resellable, transferable. Cory's worked a lot on that.
Yeah, basically as the creator, you have a lot of control over what rights you want to have, both in the object as it sits there in the world and the rights once they're transferred to whoever takes the object or purchases the object. One thing that we've done is it's sort of like for sale. One of the things we've said is the creator can either say you can't resell this item, or they can say you can't copy this item, but you can't restrain both. And that's been a point of quite a bit of contention with our creators, because certainly, especially a year or two ago when we were making a lot of these decisions, the really early creators were very much creating, for a lot of them, in a very artistic sense, and so they wanted moral rights. They wanted to say, look, I've made this thing, we'll never let anybody change it or modify it.
One of the guys we've consulted with a lot in thinking about this has been Lawrence Lessig, who's a big thinker about intellectual property rights and how they do or don't grow a society. And so it's a huge debate, and it's a very rich topic that we take really seriously. And like Cory said, we do little things to try and, our motivation is to get people to be as nice and as sharing as possible. There's a guy in World, for example, who's created a Creative Commons licensing machine that'll actually affix a Creative Commons license with the appropriate licensing text to any object that you create. And so I think we're going to see a lot of higher level branding and licensing schemes emerging that sort of lean on the basic low level features that are in the system that allow you to set rights controls. But it's a really big topic. It's like a good question.
If it's being streamed to the client, how do you prevent someone from stealing a texture and editing it and selling it again?
You can steal a texture. There's nothing, we can't prevent that. Yeah, exactly.
The word steal does not apply in like this.
Yeah. You can copy textures. You can copy vertices. So the physical appearance of objects, in the same sense that an MP3 stream could be re-recorded, are going to be fairly easy to to steal. We could get the geometry of Cory's spaghetti monster here pretty easily. But as I said earlier, sophisticated things like the scripting that's attached to it is harder to get. And then in general, there's a lot of social practice emerging around, what happens to you if you steal things all the time. And I think what we're going to see, and we're already seeing in Second Life, is stuff like SEAL programs and groups and stuff that are outing people who are being what they regard as abusive. Governance is a huge issue here. What we have is essentially a little replica of the real world and an opportunity to redo things in a different way. And so you see a lot of experimentation around that. Broadly, Second Life is pretty anarchic compared to the real world, but as it's growing, there are little pockets of order where people are establishing zoning and governance and local rules. I think there's going to be a fascinating debate around courts emerging. I mean, it's a longer topic, but people are going to start deciding who they want to let on their land and, using blacklists or whitelists on property. And as you see that congealing into larger systems, you're going to essentially have early nations or early affine communities that are emerging and excluding each other. So yeah, we had a guy, gosh, great example of like how far, you want to know how far you can go with a scripting language. We had a guy who basically built, what is it, RSA? So he basically made a thing where if you were two avatars, now bear in mind, you're two avatars in Second Life. You don't know each other's real identities, right? But you want to do business together. You want to say you're going to sell cars. One of you is going to build a dealership and pay the land costs. The other one's going to design the cars, and you're going to split the money 50-50. Again, this is $5 million a month in subject here. So how do you come up with a business contract? Well, there was this guy who basically wrote in our scripting language a thing where you two avatars could walk up, agree on a document, click a button, and have it crypto signed, give you back a token that you could use to recover that document in an authoritative way later on and say, this is what we agreed to. So that's an example of kind of how far you can go with this stuff and with the language that we've built. Yes?
Where is real money floating into you apart from sales of land?
So we make our money essentially right now from the largest share of our revenues is from land use fees, which is essentially recurring fees for land. So we sort of charge property tax. You could almost think of it like a hosting fee for the land that's in world. So we sell people real estate that essentially covers the cost of the servers as we're putting them on. We basically auction it off where there's contention between people as to who wants what space. And then we charge you according to the amount of land you have in world. So if you have an acre of land in Second Life, which is a pretty good sized space, you'll pay us about $25 US a month recurring for that acre of land. So it's a great business even from the beginning for us.
I never went to a party of the world where you can actually hurt other people, push the buttons. It makes you a weird question and then have too much technical knowledge that everyone else can. But when you, let's say, create a weapon, you cannot program it to attack others because someone may have a different avatar that you can't pick on. Right. So I don't know if you can blow up people's limbs or stuff like that, but how do you program it to do that without knowing?
Well, Right, kinetic energy is dangerous. You can be hurt by flying objects in Second Life. But let me back up and say one thing, though. Whether you can be hurt or killed by flying objects, so to speak, is a consensual act in Second Life. But it's kind of neat because it's based on the rights of the landholder. So what I mean by this is, can you be killed in Second Life? Well, no, not in most places. But let's say you're walking into a Western bar, right? And you walk into this Western bar, and up at the top of your screen, you see this little heart icon come on, which we don't have on right now. That heart icon means that in this place you can be killed by kinetic velocity. And so it's kind of cool. So what it basically means is, weapons now work. And being killed basically means you are taken away from that space and you're sent to wherever home is for you, which is only one place in the world. So it's kind of a nuisance, it's a nuisance to be killed. You can't lose anything, obviously, in Second Life because this is people's real lives and real content. But we just do that as a kind of an in-between. So consensually, if you agree that the area you're in is deadly, if the landowner sets it that way, in other words, you consent by going there, you can get killed. But it doesn't mean you lose anything. You don't lose any property. Oh, right. Yes, exactly. Wouldn't it be fun? But at this point, there is no way to take an avatar and, beat them and knock parts off of them. No. But we think that's funny. I mean, if everyone's adults and agrees, why not? And in fact, we're working on stuff like that right now. Yes.
What sort of parental control and censorship issues have you had,
right.
Given that the internet is reported?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, what sort of parental controls do we have? So what we do, and we've done this electively, is if you're 13 to 18, and you self-identify, and I'll go on though to say why there's some real teeth to that. If you're 13 to 18 years old, we put you into a continent, basically, off to the distant one side or the other, I won't tell you which, where basically there are only 13 to 18 or 13 to 17-year-olds in that continent. And like Yville or some of the other teen communities, we vigorously encourage the teens to report anyone who appears to be an adult. So what that does is, because you can't speak teen, that basically means that, you know, an adult's, in terms of protecting teens from adults, an adult's kind of time to live in the teen grid is very, very short. Similarly, we encourage adults to report people that they believe may be underage that are in what we call the main grid, which is where everybody else is. And in cases where we find reports and it looks likely that someone's underage, we demand proof of identity, proof of age, fax documents, things like that. So we're actually pretty aggressive about doing that. We don't have to do that. We could let everybody in sort of over 13 with parental permission, but we think that it's the right thing to do. You know, maybe we'll get so big that it'll be difficult to do that, or that'll be handled by users or something. But today, that's what we're doing. So the parental controls are pretty effective. There's a place for teenagers, and they tend to get sent there if they're. Yes. So in an exception to the sort of usual content control, we do try and look for adult content and things like that. But again, that's not highly scalable. We'll have to figure out ways to have that done by users and other people helping us. But you know, you can monitor what people are putting in their pockets and what they're putting in the world, and take a look at it. On the main grid, anything goes. However, whole regions can be marked as mature or PG, so you can electively not see stuff that's in mature regions if you don't want to. Yes?
How do you deal with the transition from one community to the other due to aging? Because I imagine, so you have a bunch of kids there, and now suddenly you're 18, you get put into the other continent.
We have like a birthday party ritual where we set you free and put you in the main grid when you turn 18. I haven't been to one of these things in World, but I really want to go. It sounds like kind of a cool, you know, rite of passage. Yes?
Could you talk about the cornfield?
The cornfield. It's so great. I was talking to a very well-known internet CEO the other day who told me that when he first logged into Second Life for the first time, he was sent to the cornfield immediately. So the cornfield is a penal colony. If you get in trouble in Second Life, and I think, again, the cornfield is probably a non-scalable, little amusing idea, but what happens today is you can get suspended in Second Life for like a couple days or 7 days, and then you can get kicked out. You actually get put up in front of a citizen board for review if you're going to get kicked out. The cornfield is this weird purgatory where we will sometimes send people to sort of cool off, and you can't get out of it, and it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, you know, we have a very small content development team. Part of our magic is we don't develop any content, right? But they occasionally get to stretch their arms a little bit and have fun. And so it's this cornfield with like an old 1950s tractor you can ride around, and it's just a huge cornfield. And then right in the middle of it, there's an old black and white television that plays some of those like recidivism, you know, like 1950s black and white, like, you know, you need to be good to society, Johnny. And it's just this. Oh, Johnny knows about lying. It'll kill you. It's so funny, and it just plays forever, you know. So it's also, Cory did show you can stream live music and live video into Second Life as well. So there are movie theaters. There's live music. Live music is one of the big phenomena right now in Second Life. If you think about it, this is a micro example of why what we're doing is so cool, right? You can go and show up at a nightclub in Second Life, stand on stage in your avatar, and basically play with Shoutcast live music that you're piping out of your studio directly into Second Life. If you haven't tried this in Second Life as an observer, it is a really eerie experience because you're sitting there with your avatar, sitting around, you know, chit-chatting with people next to you at the cafe table, and like I'll walk in. I mean, I'm, you know, there's a little advantage to being me. We all have the same name. I'm Philip Linden. Cory's Cory Linden. I'll like walk in, and the performer will look at me, and then he'll be like, "Oh, Philip Linden in the house," you know. It's just weird, you know, super weird thing where you're walking in as an avatar, but they're actually live. People buy CDs from each other, leave tips, and just generally, you can raise as large an audience, you know, in Second Life on a Friday night, and live music is one of the, unfortunately the main grid's not up, we can't look up all the listings. There's like live music every night, and there's, you know, 50 or 100 people will be at one of those shows, and I mean, that's the same as what you'd get on, you know, Polk Street in San Francisco, so it's a really interesting phenomenon. And you can ask people for money, you can get tips in Linden dollars, and you can sell CDs. So that's a really... Oh, I didn't know that. Homeless guy moved into his apartment.
Yeah, we had one of our residents was staying with friends because he had lost his place and he was effectively homeless. And they showed him Second Life, and he's a pretty decent musician. So he started playing live music, put out a tip jar, said, "I'm trying to raise money to actually get an apartment again," and gather enough money to move back into an apartment.
Yeah, we've got. I mean, there's stories like that. I mean, it's really a fun place to work, not just because we have kind of an unusual internal culture, I think, in some of the same ways Google does, but also just because what we're working on is so neat. I mean, you get stories like this all the time. I mean, there was a guy on Slashdot the other day who said, "I'm an IT engineer in a country in which the unemployment rate is 25%. He said, "But about half of my income is Second Life. So I'm about halfway done with this problem." I mean, it's pretty interesting.
How much of the interactions in chats do you log?
As little as we can. We keep a short-term... Yeah, temporarily we kind of keep everything. We see financial transactions and chat and instant messages. That would be for if somebody really gets in trouble, I mean, if there's a warrant or, a federal, something like that happening. I don't even think we've had to do that yet, but we keep a short trailing record of text and then it's gone. But again, pragmatically, the world is so huge and the data volume so large. None of this stuff lives on a real database. We use MySQL for central storage of some of these assets, but the actual simulator machines themselves, they're kind of like in-memory data systems. We don't even attempt to use a real database. The transaction rate would be vastly beyond even now what you could do, I think, with anything that's out there.
Okay. You mentioned there's an exchange rate between in-game dollars and real dollars. How does currency get into the system, and how do you keep it?
Can you show us the page? Or is it up? So we're like the Federal Reserve. We basically manage the money supply. That's a long conversation, but in essence, we act with the goal of stabilizing the money supply. We don't actually make money from the currency, although we charge a percentage on currency exchange transactions, so we do make a revenue that way. But we basically manage, like Alan Greenspan, the market. And our target of management is to keep that upper line as stable as possible. And you can see over the last month, the variance is between 270 and 281 or so. So the currency is actually quite stable. Again, the volume is high. There's about $800,000 transacted, I think, last month. So it's already a fairly stable market. There are speculators, there are day traders in our currency. So there's lots of people in there trading. But per economic theory, that's actually a good thing. You actually want multiple day traders fighting each other.
Are there plans to merge Second Life in the browser or add rich networking capabilities to objects so that the cryptographic signing you mentioned could be easily by calling some server, you could play back in and on the internet back in the server or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah, we've already got most of that done. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we're also integrating Firefox, or more correctly, we're integrating the Gecko core of Mozilla, and so that's in testing right now. So that's going to obviously let us bridge into pretty much, well, all of the web.
Yeah, so you'll be able to manipulate objects in world that have web surfaces on them, basically, that are connected to the web. We already do XML, RPC, and email bidirectionally today or XML out and email in, or email out and XML in from the web. So that's how people do stuff like, you can make an object in Second Life where you can click the button and have it change something on your website. You talk to a web database. What else? You had another one.
There's a tremendous potential for advertising. It's not limited by billboards or whatever. You can do objects. Have you been approached by any real world companies to do
Yes.
this? And where are your plans in? Because we want to keep the world organic.
Totally. Yeah, so we've been approached by pretty much everybody. This thing's kind of taken off in the last few months. Our mission, though, is to maintain a level playing field and a level platform. So we as a company won't do a deal pretty much with anybody for almost any conceivable reason. And advertising is a great example of that. So we're encouraging people to build advertising syndicates and systems in world. But if you talk about putting billboards in world, we'll never do that. We've been approached by people who are interested in doing that, but we just tell them, well, you have to buy land. If you're an advertiser and you want to buy real estate and put billboards on it, hey, good for you. It's on the website. You can buy land or buy land from another user. There's actually a group of users who built a thing called Metaverse that's actually a fully automated system where you can get billboards and bus signs and stuff from them, put them on your land, and there's thousands of people who have. and then they actually display ads when people walk by the billboard. You can see when an avatar walks by, and they actually charge the advertiser and give some of the money to the landowner in much the same way I guess Google does with AdWords.
Can you automatically measure how many people are walking by?
Yes, you can see everything. I mean, you can see the name of the avatar that's walking by you if you're a billboard. So you can record who probably saw your advertisement very easily. And yeah, that's right. Oh, you can tell where they're looking. So yeah, you can see if they're looking spot on at your billboard.
But demographics you don't expose.
No, obviously, yeah. I mean, I guess not totally obviously, but heck no. We would never let anybody see each other's demographic information or anything else that they didn't want to expose.
I mean, how's this split across countries? Is it usually U.S. focused and Korean, or is it?
Well, it's mostly U.S. right now. We haven't localized the client to full double byte yet. So as a result, or even European languages. So well, we have the chat system.
We're double byte, but we haven't localized the client. We haven't done local language.
Right. So we expect and hope that this will really take off, like in Asia, as we're able to start doing that, which will be soon. But today, it's mostly a European and North American phenomena. The UK is our big number 2 outside of the United States. We always say that like bad weather, bad weather, good broadband, and oppressive regimes are really good reasons to people use Second Life. You laugh, but Second Life competes with the real world. If you look at who we're competing with, we're just competing with discretionary time. It's really interesting. And you can see patterns of that. Like in the United States, I'm gonna be at like PC Forum next week, and talking about this. And I did an analysis that we had never done before, where I looked at how many people per 1,000 people in metro areas use Second Life, and it's totally like Seattle, 0.5, like one of the highest numbers in the country, right? Terrible weather, good broadband. It's really interesting. There's sort of a pattern around that. Los Angeles and New York, lowest level of use. Now, part of that can be that those are huge metro areas with larger populations that don't have computers and stuff, but still, it's a fascinating statistic. Big difference between different areas.
What kind of IRS regulations do you run into since people are making income?
So IRS regulations, what do we run into? Well, first of all, just like eBay or anything else, if you're drawing money from us, if you're transferring currency, you're getting a wire transfer into your bank account. That's an income event. You have to deal with that. So first of all, the problem is on you as a person who's making money in the same way that it is if you're using eBay to make money. Having said that, though, we reach out to the different regulators and government folks and tell them about what we're doing. But frankly, this stuff is so early and so different that a lot of them are just kind of, I don't know what to tell you. But we're a lot of this stuff is just kind of new territory in terms of what the rulings will be. But I think with respect to making money, it's fundamentally, it's fundamentally your problem, because there's an income event anytime you're taking money out. So it's now incumbent on you as an individual to justify what costs were or anything else, in your, when you do your tax return. Yes.
Do you foresee a time when the IRS might actually start to use commercial property as having to inherit that monetary value? So even if you don't sell something for dollars, the fact that you have so much property.
Right. People talk about that a lot. I really think that would be a long ways off. I mean, where is the property? So people do have discussions about that, but I would suspect that it's going to be one of those things where the governmental regulations of that will be hopefully relatively consistent with rates of fastest progress. I mean, it's so hard to imagine a regulatory scheme by which you would measure the value of your assets in Second Life, but we haven't been approached by anybody talking about that, but it is an interesting kind of an intellectual question.
How much money did Cory spend during this demo?
How much money did Cory spend during this demo? None. He didn't buy anything.
The magic wand's about $30.
30 Linden dollars?
30 US.
Is it really? Holy moly. So 30 times 2, well, that's a lot of money. Star Axe's wand is probably the coolest single thing you can own in Second Life, so $30 a piece. Yeah. Like I say, though, seriously, we had a user conference, and we had a bunch of our users there, and then we had a bunch of lawyers there because we did it at the State of Play conference in New York, and one of the attention-getting things I think we said a couple of times was, look, you guys, most of the people in the audience that are doing businesses in Second Life, they make more than you. So just keep that in mind, as we start. I mean, it's really profitable right now because it's an early stage market where people are kind of plowing the dark, right? They're moving into the unknown. They're building all this new stuff that nobody's ever seen. So the opportunity is enormous, and that's part of the, the sort of pioneering feeling that permeates Second Life and brings people in so quickly.
How many of those wands have actually been sold?
I would guess, I mean, we look at, do you know?
I don't know how many, but I know it's a lot. Because you keep bumping into people in the world, and you just see them playing with the wand, all over the place.
We have a way to know that. Like I said, it's probably thousands, and like I said, there's like that gun we looked at that's similarly fancy and cool. It's probably in the 5,000 to 10,000 range now, maybe a bit more. And like I said, there's the really amazing diversity question, how is Second Life different than real life? Again, let me say this. This is a world, this is a tiny little town, right? With 150,000 people, 20,000 people a day, 5,000 people out on the street, so to speak, at night. That in the last month, people have purchased 180,000 distinct things. So you go through this town and you'd count all the purchasable things, and there's 180,000 of them. Okay, 2 more questions.
So I'm guessing that every user builds a little and buys a little, but that you can split them up into people who mostly build and mostly consume. What's the population like? How does that break down?
So in the trailing 7 days, 75% of the people have made something from scratch. And that's with the demographic that has a median age of 36, that's 50% female by use. It's astounding, actually.
Let me add to that though. So there's playing around and making things, and then there's sort of active production. We've also watched the rate of active production as a fraction of the audience, as a fraction of the total user base. We estimate, if you looked at Second Life about a year ago, one of the statistics you can look at is the number of buyers and the number of sellers in a cohort. You can say how many people sold and how many people bought. That number today is about 75% buyers and 25% sellers. So another way of looking at it statistically suggests that about 25% of the population is creating content for about 75%. So we're still very young by that metric. Let me go to, you had a question because we haven't heard from you yet.
What happens when the person who makes the magic wand, what if he thinks of another object he wants to add to the wand? What happens to everybody who's already bought the wand?
So what he does is he actually records everybody who bought it, and he directly mails you in the system updates. So part of the reason he's been so successful is everybody who has the wand is talking about, ooh, well, I got the new update today, and now it does cows or whatever. Because remember, the point of the wand is the wand's basically an emoticon equivalent for a 3D virtual world. You hold the wand while you're sitting around chatting, and all these random things appear, because all it's doing is parsing chat text. And so I wasn't using it that way, but if you're actually having a conversation, it's basically like you're getting this sort of emoticon equivalence around you all the time.
Yeah. So that's one of the powers as well, is that you have objects that can update themselves dynamically. So
It's not built into this.
no, he built a system, and we
Scripting language to build
yeah,
delivery system.
yeah, no, we haven't built in like a fancy update your version thing yet, but we could. I mean, it's just lots more code. It's already a lot of code, so we'll be here to hang around. I know I think Hunter's going to tell us we're out of time, and thanks everybody for coming. It's great. Thanks for your time.